Today's reading is from 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 through 6. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. This is the word of the Lord.
So for the last 2 months, we've been, there's a card. I forgot. Gosh, there's a card. We really need your help. Come and help. Come and participate. Fellas, if you're not serving, come do set up and tear down. It's actually going to be pretty amazing. God is going to just build community in the most unexpected ways. If you are willing to dive in and help us in this next season, fill out this card, and they're going to pass baskets. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I always forget one thing, one service, so just who knows which one it will be. We have leaned in together, just recognizing that we are a spiritual people who live in a spiritual world, who need to understand our spiritual identity in the midst of the spiritual realities that live around us. That so many of us have actually lived in either a hyper false form of spirituality or even far more, a hyper lessened form of spirituality, pretending as if the world is only in the natural, dismissing everything in the spiritual or the supernatural as for the few or the extreme. But we want to be a people that just simply come back to the truth and hold to the truth of Jesus, recognizing we are a spiritual people filled by the Spirit to live a spiritual life in the midst of a spiritual world. None of it denying the importance of our physical lives and the physical world we have around us. But it's here today and next Sunday that I want to take all of the conversations that we've had together and begin to invite you into what I think the heart of Jesus is for us, which is freedom. And I am convinced that freedom is found in the truth, and truth will always lead to freedom. And I want to even just tell you that this morning, the invitation I have in front of you is going to feel quite simple, but I've learned that's usually the nature of what's true. It's simpler than we would want to imagine or at times understand. And I believe that in the midst of everything that's complicated, there is a simple invitation in front of us. It's to be a people who understand what it means to live in the truth. And how do we anchor our lives according to it? Because if we can be a people of the truth, we can be a people who find freedom. And I believe that it is actually the spiritual world functions around us based on truth and lies more than anything else. There's this moment, John chapter 8, Jesus is actually in an exchange with the crowd that's listening to him. Some of them are his disciples, some are religious leaders, and it's actually gets pretty heated. We're not going to look at the part that builds. Like there's a confrontation between Jesus and the leadership of the Jewish community in this moment, and they start to basically call him demonic and that he's filled with the devil, and he's like, no, you are, and it's pretty awesome. You just want to read it. We're not going to lean into the last half of that, but I do want to look at the first half, whereas he's saying this important phrase. Look at John 8. He says, to the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Jesus replied, very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I've come to realize that I've always, as a follower of Jesus, believed this verse, but I had a way of limiting it unintentionally. When I heard Jesus say that, he says he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that the truth will set you free, I saw it as a connection point that Jesus is the truth and Jesus will set you free, and that's true, but I didn't see the wide, full reality of it. I've come to discover that what Jesus meant isn't simply the glorious truth that he is the truth and he is the one who sets you free, but that truth in its nature is where freedom is found. That when you actually become a person who turns your heart and mind towards the truth, you will find freedom. And truth is the anchor of where all liberty, where all transformation, where all hope can be found. And we have this way of actually being people who turn away and actually have a difficult time simply living in the truth. And sometimes the truth is stunning and hopeful and beautiful, and it's almost too good to be true. So we don't believe it. But then we have the latter, where at times to believe the truth is actually to see something for what it really is, to own the consequences for what they really are, and to actually hold the gravity of something that has actually happened. Sometimes we would rather live in lies because we don't want to carry the weight of the truth. But I'm telling you, whether the truth is painful or beautiful, it is where truth resides. And when we learn how to be a people who simply live within the truth, we will find freedom. And, you read this passage, and I'm sure as our awareness of history, it's almost stunning that their response to Jesus is like, I need to get free? Listen, we are the descendants of Abraham, and we have never been slaves to anyone. And you're like, I kind of think it's your whole story. Like you are the people enslaved by Egypt that God came and lived. Like the exile is your rescue story. God came alongside of you. You are his covenant. That's like your story. That's your story. And by the way, you're currently enslaved by Rome, right? And you read that, and it's almost like this stunning picture. But this is what I want you to see. As strange, as striking as it is for us to hear the response of like, why are you saying that to me? I've never been a slave to anyone, is as equal to how we respond when we think, I don't need freedom either, Jesus. I'm not a slave to anything. Our response is just as foolish as theirs. Whether you have eyes to see it or not, this is what we must receive from this moment in the text. That Jesus comes with an invitation of freedom. The truth will set you free. And our most common reaction is like, I don't think so. I don't think so. But Jesus, obviously, he informs. He's not talking about even story or circumstance, or he's talking about the reality embedded within that every single one of us, born into sin, enslaved unto sin, until we find freedom, have become people who live under the bondage that sin entangles us into. And it's here that we see that the central invitation of Jesus is to freedom. And the central place to freedom is truth. And I think that for so many of us, this has become quite complicated. And Jesus wants to return it to something quite simple. Let me tell you briefly, several weeks ago, I was putting my son Cyrus to bed, and we were just talking as we normally do. And Emily and I had actually been just talking earlier about the teaching series, and he was listening. And we went to bed. We were talking about some things, and he was asking all of the 8-year-old questions that anybody would ask around spiritual life and angels and demons, which are just the questions we have, but we're too embarrassed to ask. And we were talking through them, and then talked about a little bit about truth and lies, just really simple. And then Cyrus said, but Dad, aren't you stupid if you believe a lie? I go, I don't know. I don't think so, bud. Do you think that? And we began to unpack this inner conversation and this moment of Cyrus thinking he knew something that was true and finding out it wasn't true and feeling embarrassed and words and moments and this feeling. I said, well, you understand, Cyrus, what you're feeling is you feel like you believed something that wasn't true and you believe that makes you stupid, yeah? We just talked, my little boy. And I just talked about how that's not true. How do we know what's true? Jesus tells us what's true and how important it is. And he even asked, he's like, well, what is that? Why do I have those thoughts? I go, lots of reasons, bud. Lots of reasons. You have your own voice of your heart, and I don't know, you could be embarrassed. You have this thing called the curse of sin inside of you that lies to you all the time, and you heard things that other people say, and when it hurts, they can kind of come attached to us. And yeah, there's an enemy who is the father of lies, and his native tongue is lying, and he could be lying to you, and I don't really know at all, but I just know that actually, whenever you find a lie, all you have to do is come back to what the truth is. and stand in it. And it was just this moment where Cyrus, because annoyingly actually, just always gets out of his covers and stands back up. But it's just like, I'm not stupid. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. You're not stupid. You're not stupid. I put that in front of you because the childlike expression of that is not immaturity, it's Christ-likeness. The reality is that so many of us need some bedtime chats with our Father who just goes, I'm pretty sure that's not true. Let's go to Jesus. You'd be amazed at the amount of little lies that find their way in. I have come to see that the power of lies is the millions of little ones we never discerned. Because the power of the greatest lies is how much they feel true, how much they have truthful elements, and how often they are deceptive in their nature because there is a part of them that is true or feels so true that we can't discern the falseness within. We have to learn how to be a people of the truth once again. I just even stop and I ask you to consider this. How many lies live in your day? How many moments? When you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, what do you say? What do you see? What do you feel? When you get that phone call from that person or your text thread in this place or you remember that circumstance, what does it say? When you're responding to different situations, like the reality is, if we took an audit of our lives, I think we would find an overwhelming weight of lies have actually begun to distinguish and speak over what we believe to be true, who we believe to be true, and what we believe to be true about ourselves. And what we have to begin to discern is that the minute you actually believe that a lie is telling you the truth, it robs your ability to believe that Jesus is telling you the truth. And so when you come into a place where lies become our normal habitat, no wonder we wrestle with our faith, because we actually cannot even discern that there are things that are robbing our ability to trust Jesus that have nothing to do with him and have nothing to do with us, that have everything to do with the million little lies that have found their way in. And I believe that it is lies that are robbing our freedom like never before. And we have to understand, I want to synthesize a handful of conversations that we've had to lead towards kind of a conclusive end, which is going to just open the door to next Sunday. But I want to invite you into this, that if the heart of God is for freedom, then we have to understand it. Galatians says this, Paul's writing, it says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Mark my words. I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be no value to you at all. Fella is not talking about whatever decision your mom and dad made for you. That's not the point. He's actually talking distinctly about that these brand new followers of Jesus are Gentiles, and they are being attacked by the lies of this extreme group, not the messianic community of followers of Jesus, but an extreme faction of them that said, not only do you need to do all of the stuff you're doing, but you have to actually enter into the laws and the works of the law and become Jewish itself to be saved. And so here they are. And what Paul's saying to the Galatian Christians is, if you agree with that, if you actually agree that salvation is Jesus plus this work, Jesus plus this effort, Jesus plus this thing that you have to do to perform to be righteous, then the cross and the resurrection have no value to you. Because you've just bought into the lie that any form of work or righteousness, any form of effort can actually be the very thing that saves you. He's saying that Christ is of no value to you because ultimately you're looking at his cross. You want to know what happens when we believe we have to do a little bit more than the cross to be loved by God, to be liked by God, to be welcomed by God, to be forgiven by God? What you're actually doing is looking at the cross of Jesus and going, not enough. I know you're the Son of God. I know you're the eternal creator who spoke all things into motion. I know my matter holds into existence because you exist and you like me. I know that you actually were sinless and laid down your life on the cross and you woke up from the dead and now you're the resurrected Lord of human history. I get it, not enough. Do you know that when you look up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you're like, I really don't like myself? What you're actually saying is, Jesus, not enough. Thank you for the cross. But yeah, I wish it was just a little bit better. Could you give me the cross in the way I want to look? Could you give me the cross in the marriage I wish I had? Could you give me the cross and a little bit of money? Now that maybe feels like the salvation I was looking for. You see, it's just, we just don't see. I'm not accusing you. Gosh, if I am, let me be first in line. I just think we don't slow down to realize how many lies we believe or actually the cascading implications of them. But this challenge, it reminds us of two things. First, that freedom is a gift. It's a gift that we can receive. You can't earn, you can't perform for it. It is only based on Jesus and his gift of righteousness. He alone can set you free, and it is up to him and him alone. But also, it's a salvation work that we have to partner with in the midst of our circumstances. Not an earning, not an effort, not a performing, but the reality that freedom's not a light switch. It's not like Jesus set you free, light switch, free. Gosh, if that was the case, life would feel a little different than it does, doesn't it? Which actually points to the tension, why Paul would say it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. So apparently you can be free and not free all at the same time. Welcome to the 21st century American Christian life. Free and not free. Doesn't it feel like it's become our normal? Maybe it is the normal. Maybe it'll never change, right? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe God's the problem. Maybe the gospel's the problem. Maybe I should just leave the problem. You see how this works? how the tension of not understanding why we feel free and not free at the same time can actually be the very invitation that robs our faith itself. But it's that reality that freedom is a gift that's given that we must choose to remain in. So there is a partnership. Paul says it in the same way in Philippians 2. He goes, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Like on first glance, you read that and I'm like, I thought I read in Ephesians 2 that I was saved by grace, not by works, so that no one could boast, and saved by grace through faith. I want to just remind you there's a profound difference between working for something and working out something. Because this is often what we misunderstand, that when Jesus rescues you, saves your life, or when a work of redemption and freedom happens in your life, what he doesn't do is change your habits, your friend group, your circumstances, your thought processes, and all of the details of your life. You are going to wake up saved and rescued in all of the stories of bondage that still existed. And what Paul is saying to the Philippian church, what the Holy Spirit is saying to us is like, hey, this work of freedom and salvation in your life, it's real. But you have to know it didn't light switch change everything about your life. You have to now take this freedom, you have to take this salvation, and you have to work it out in your life. How does it change the way you interact with people? How does it change the way you steward your heart? How does it change the way you respond to conflict? How does it change the way you're afraid? How does it change the way you're married or have children or are single or steward different things in your life? You actually have to take this work and partner with it. So freedom is a free gift and a permanent partnership. And when we don't understand that nature, I think that's where we can get lied to so often. And I just want to say, because I think this matters, what we submit to for our identity will be the master of our future. What you actually believe is telling you the truth about who you are will be the master of your future and everywhere you go. If you believe Jesus is telling you the truth about your identity, your future will be with Jesus and where he's inviting you to go. If you believe you are, then your future will be where you want it to go and left in your hands. If you believe lies are, then they'll take you where lies go. We have to be a people who return to the simplicity that we believe Jesus is telling us the truth. I get it's not that easy though sometimes, right? Or why doesn't it feel that easy? This is where I want to tell you that this is where the simple and the complicated get connected. I'm not trying to take your situations, your stories, your circumstances and tell them they're insignificant, or I can throw one line at you and I've solved every problem in your life. But I do want to tell you that at the end of every complicated story in question is just one thing. It'll always be one thing. Who do you believe is telling you the truth? That's every question. Is Jesus telling you the truth? Or is he not? Because if he is, it doesn't necessarily change that some of the stories are complicated and how we find our way through them into freedom isn't going to take time or challenge. But the plumb line gets created, the compass is clear. And what happens is that so often we're dealing with the fruit of a situation when we actually need to start asking the question, why am I having a hard time as a Christian believing that Jesus is telling me the truth? Those are the questions that are going to lead us to answers that are going to lead us to freedom. And it's here that we see this invitation. One of the things that we talked about was understanding this makeup of humans, right? Body, soul, and spirit. If you didn't make that teaching, you can go back several weeks and find it. It's still online. But we just slowed down and said, hey, inside of us are these elements, and we have to understand it. The Bible's really clear about two things, that you have this body and that this body's been cursed by sin. And I don't think I need to convince anyone of that. We all understand our propensity to be selfish or to do things we don't want to do, or the incredible harm that can come in the hands of humans. The most loving, kind people still have this thing in them. It's because the curse of sin is real. But you also, made in the image of God, you are not simply the curse of sin. You are the beloved image of God, carrying the divine nature of his image woven inside of you. And because of that, you have a spirit. Your spirit is a real thing. You can't see it in the natural eyes, but it is a true metaphysical substance. You have one, you are one. And actually, the minute you come into Jesus, that spirit becomes alive, becomes resurrected, comes into union with the Father. And here's what the Bible tells us. Your flesh will never find redemption in this life. It'll die, and you'll get a new body. Your body matters, but you'll get a new one, free from the curse of sin. And your spirit is resurrected in Jesus. It's flawless, it's perfect, it has never sinned, it can never be harmed, it is in complete union with God, it is perfect, and it's incredible news. The Bible calls it new creation. And this is the tension, right? That inside of you is curse and resurrection. And you're like, how in the world do I steward my life when my life is curse and resurrection? Well, that's what Paul takes all of Romans 7 to talk about, this challenge of a life that bounces. And he even says in this moment, trying to describe the very circumstances of a follower of Jesus who is aware that they have curse and resurrection inside of them. And he talks about this voice. He goes, the very thing I do want to do, I don't do. The very thing I don't want to do, I do do. And this leads me to this place of death. Wretched man that I am. Have you ever felt like that? You ever been in a moment where all you want to do is follow Jesus or honor your word or do what's right? And you're like, why am I doing this? And you're like, I'm just wretched. I'm awful. I know better. I know that every time I sin, it has actually been put on the very cross of Jesus. Every time I sin now, I have to wrestle through the thought that knowingly I am saying, Jesus, I'm so happy you would take this one for me. Oh, just the reality of like, God, why is this in me? But the beauty is Romans 7 doesn't leave us there. It honors that challenge, but it says, but the curse inside of you and the resurrection inside of you, they're not equals. One has more authority than the other. Where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. Where there's death, life has victory. And the promise is actually what God has done inside of us through new creation, has authority over the reality of the curse inside of us, though we will carry it until the day we die. And 1 John says, anyone who says they're without sin is lying. But the power is that in the midst of this tension, is that the Spirit of God now inside of you, the resurrected spiritual life now inside of you, has authority in the midst of the challenges of life and the curse of sin, because resting in the middle is this thing called a soul. I just choose to be somebody who believes what the Bible makes clear and just holds with grace and gray what the Bible doesn't say explicitly. What the Bible tells us is that you have a soul. It doesn't really tell us what is a soul. Maybe it's a second metaphysical substance. Maybe it isn't. I don't really think it matters. I just think it matters that you recognize that the Bible tells you inside of you, between spirit and flesh, is this thing called a soul. It's your mind, It's your will. It's your emotions. It's your personhood. It's this reality of who you are and what you see yourself to be. And what we have to understand is that actually in between these two functioning realities is this you. And this you has a choice. And what you do with that choice will determine whether you will be free or not. And it's here. Paul says this in Romans as he's unpacking. He goes, the thing you have to understand when you read Romans 8, Paul uses this word mind. It's a good translation of it. But in the Greek, that word mind means your thinking, your thoughts, your emotions, your inner person. It's what the word we would use for soul. So whenever in Romans 8 you're reading Paul, everywhere he says mind, just write soul, because that's the language we would use. That'll help you rightly understand him. So he says this, those who live according to the flesh have set their souls on what the flesh desires. But those who live according to the Spirit have set their souls on what the Spirit desires. The soul governed by the flesh is death, but the soul governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The soul governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. For those who are led by the Spirit of God, that's us, that's you, are children of God. And the Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. The Spirit you received brought you out about your adoption to sonship, and by him you cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs with God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings in order that we may share in his glory. This entire picture is an invitation of saying, hey, resting between your curse and your resurrection, your flesh and your spirit is this mind, this soul, this will, heart, and emotions, this you, and you can place it on the flesh and you can place it on the spirit, and what you choose to do with it will determine the future of your life. Because it's talking about what you agree with. In your personhood, what do you agree with your mind, your heart, your will, and emotions? Your soul has a choice. And what we've normalized as Christians is that we love Jesus, but we agree with our emotions. What we do is we love Jesus, but we agree with our experiences. We love Jesus and we agree with the voices of our flesh and the enemy because we have under-spiritualized the world so much we cannot even discern what they are. And what it does in our lives is it robs us from freedom. And I don't want anything to rob us from freedom anymore. And what the Bible speaks about is that what happens when we set our hearts on lies is that lies begin to accrue and build, and they compile on each other. The Bible uses the concept of a stronghold. Now I want you to slow down and just think about like ancient Rome. If you're a guy, what's the statistics? You do it about 8 times a day or something. Pretty easy. But I want you to just capture a Germanic village, just like the tribes outside of Rome around Julius Caesar. There are all these farming villages, but what would happen? They would have one stronghold. And if danger came, all of the people would come, they would gather together. It was usually on a mountaintop. It was built significantly stronger than any other thing. It was hard to reach. It accrued all of its resources, and you could hold out the storm there. That's the picture, right? And I want you to imagine that picture in your heart. When you first believe a lie, it just kind of is like a little villager in your heart. And then you believe another, and there's another villager, and another, and another, and another, and the next thing you know, those villagers have a stronghold. And it's this massed place of lies that begin to deform you. How do you know when a lie has tipped over into what the Bible would call a stronghold? A lie says, I feel rejected. A stronghold says, I am rejected. A lie says, I feel unworthy. A stronghold says, I am unworthy. A lie says, I feel unloved. A stronghold says, I am unloved. I know I could keep going on, but I think you see it. Because this is what lies do. They form and they connect and they speak about our identity. And where they build and build and build, they go from feelings that what could be true into statements of identity we have come to believe are true. And because you want to know it, when you have the feeling like you're not worthy, It's a lie. Now, it could be that you did something that was inappropriate and it has consequence. And the truth of it is that it wasn't living up to how worthy you really are. And you're gonna have to be honest and you're gonna have to own the consequences of that. That's the truth. Sometimes the truth is not fun. Sometimes the truth is, I made a mistake. I'm embarrassed by my mistake. My mistake has consequences, and I don't want to face those consequences. But you want to know what's beautiful about Jesus in the midst of that even scenario? You're still worthy. Because Jesus has determined your worth is up to his righteousness and not yours. And yet we wrestle with believing him. We struggle to hold on to him. We are so used to lies. It's almost like we don't even know what it's like to live in the truth. And I want to just help you begin to see this picture that your life and my life was made for freedom. And because of our circumstances, and I believe distinctly because of our culture, next week I'm going to tell you a little more about the school of secularism, which is a weird name. I didn't know what else to call it. But it's just about Jesus and the culture we live in and how the culture we live in has belief systems, and those belief systems actually deeply affect us. I talked about this with you quite a bit, but that picture is because in our culture's belief systems, our emotions are our truth tellers. That's what secular culture believes. And our experiences are our authorities. Because when you don't believe God is authority or there's truth at all, those two things have to replace it. And as Christians, we would say, I don't believe that, but then all of our actions tell us we do believe it. And we have to discern how much we've been affected by that, because when your emotions become your truth tellers, no wonder we have a hard time believing Jesus when he's telling us something different than our emotions are. We've just vaulted the authorities. And when I actually come into places of lies through pain, the minute I start believing that I'm not worthy, I can no longer believe what Jesus says over me. And the minute I start believing the lie, I make room for more than the lie. And this is what we have to understand. If what I've told you is true, if what the Bible tells us is true, and we live in a spiritual world that has spiritual things around us, what I want to compel you with, I compel you wherever you trust me, even if you're like, I don't know what I think about this, to trust me enough to pursue it, because if what I'm telling you is true, it has massive consequences. Because what the Bible tells us is that when we allow lies to form a stronghold, when we come into agreement with that stronghold, the way the enemy works is through agreements. And when I believe this lie that I'm not worthy, that's when spiritual powers that really want me to feel unworthy can come connected into my life. And that's some of the stories I want to share with you next week. Because I want you to understand the voice of your heart, the voice of your soul wants to know and be known. The voice of your spirit, it's already in union with the Father. It's right now your spirit. I want you to know this. Your spirit is going, Abba, Father, I love you. I don't care what you're feeling. Inside of you right now, your spirit man, spirit woman, you're inside of you is actually like worshiping the Father, radically in love with him, believes him for everything, has no wounds, has no problems, has no doubts. That's in you right now. So the question is, why is that reality that's in you never coming to the surface? Because I think in our soul, we've come into agreement with so many little lies. And it's usually the little lies that we actually have such a cover. We don't even know how to get back to the truth. Matt, wherever you're at, you can come on up. There you are. I see you. You're so great. Matt's so great. You know, it's the picture of Song of Songs. Song of Songs is this incredible book about marriage and intimacy that has just truths. It's a book about marriage, sexuality, intimacy, but it teaches us about a lot more than that. And Song of Songs 2, it's this moment where this married couple intimacy has been lost, like connection, love. They're lost from each other. And the whole passage is about how they're trying to get back to this place of connection, but they can't. And there's this moment where she's up in this cave. She cries out, catch the little foxes. Catch the foxes. They're ruining the vineyard. The vineyard is the place of intimacy between this couple. And what she's saying is like, you wanna know the reason we're so disconnected, the reason we can't find this union that we were made for is all the little lies. Most of us aren't wrestling because we've bought into the big ones. We're wrestling because we haven't discerned all the little ones. And I just say to you, the heart of Jesus, it's time to catch the foxes. It's time to protect the vineyard because you were made for union with God. And it doesn't mean that the union of life with God is gonna be always easy. Is it gonna face challenge? But it actually is a life in the midst of challenge that can have freedom. And the best news about all of this is I wanna bring you back to the verse that Erica read at the beginning. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. Good for us to remember in days like these. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. So I want you to know right now, this is what's true. You have divine power to demolish this reality. Wherever it's present in your life or could be present in your life, you already have the authority to destroy this. It's so incredible. Paul's actually quoting Julius Caesar. We just can't discern it. It's so amazing. I can't wait for next week. It's like one of my favorite parts of the Bible. He goes, we demolish strongholds or arguments and pretensions that set themselves up against the knowledge of God. That voice that wants to tell my son he's stupid, whatever it is, whether it's his own embarrassment or a demon or anything in between, that is a voice that wants to stand as a lie, as an accuser against the knowledge of God, because it is the knowledge of God that tells my son who he is. It's the knowledge of God that tells you who you are. And every time there's that place that goes, I don't know, man, I'm not worthy. That's a voice that wants to stand against the knowledge of God, that wants to accuse what God declares to be true. And it's time that we recognize it's time to stand up against the lies that want to accuse the knowledge of God about you. It's time to realize that these things that are keeping you from freedom don't have to exist in your life. And it's gonna lead you to truth. And truth, even where it's painful, is gonna lead you to freedom. And when we actually have the ability to be people who no longer, this is what we do, we're so afraid of the truth that we either minimize or shame ourselves. We experience something and instead of actually just holding into the intention it is, we minimize it, acting like it's not as big of a deal as it is. It's a big deal. Or then we take it and we let shame run with it and we let it condemn us into places that isn't true. Guys, I just want to tell you, when you learn the life that no longer needs to minimize or justify things that happen in your life that need ownership or correction, but you don't have to live under the slanders of the father of lies who takes the very things that have happened to you, through you, in you, and accuse you against them, you will find freedom. And it's this picture, because the promise is that we demolish every argument and pretension that stands up, and we take captive every thought that make it obedient to Christ. Because then we will be able to punish every act of disobedience. Once your obedience is complete, it's actually a picture of what's gonna happen in your own heart and mind. Because there is a war that you're in, and there's a way to win a war. Julius Caesar writes his book in the Gallic Wars, this is how you win a war, this is how you beat strongholds. And Paul, as he's writing to the Romans or to the Corinthians, is like, he's right. We just are fighting a different war. That's why he clarifies that at the beginning. And he wants to give you tools of freedom. And that's the heart of God in this season, freedom. And that's where Jesus is taking us as a church. Freedom. Freedom from our pasts. Freedom from the lies we believe through them. And freedom from the stories we faced. There's 4 ways, this is where I'll close, I know we gotta go. There's 4 ways that strongholds develop. False teaching and heresy, willful and repeated sin, partnering with the occult, and wounds. So I admonish you on the first three. Don't do them. And we'll lean into them a little bit more. These are significant, and I don't minimize them just because I'm moving to the fourth one. But the reason I want to just close here is because I want you to understand that more than anything else, this is what's happening to us. This is the distinct scheme of the enemy. We talked about that last week in our generation. Why? Because the formation, what was the first move? To convince the church to be under spiritual. Okay, we got under spiritual. Then what? We became a little bit more secular. We became a little bit more in touch with our emotions, which is not a bad thing. But because we were secular in getting in touch with our emotions, we didn't know how to put boundaries around it. So now our emotions are authority. What that really means is your greatest trauma is your authority. When your emotions are your authority, it always means the most evil thing done to you, or the most evil thing you've ever done, or the greatest lie or circumstance of wounding in your life becomes the identity mark of your life. Welcome to emotions as authority. What a beautiful gift the secular age has given you. It's not liberty, it's slavery. And when we see it for what it is, you're gonna get angry. But then, an under-spiritualized world with emotions as authority, then I get hurt. Because life hurts, and I've hurt people, and I've been hurt by people, and you've hurt people, and you've been hurt by people, and life hurts. We've been let down, we've been disappointed, we've been failed, we've been left. And those wounds, they start to speak over us. And they drift us from believing Jesus to believing them. And starting to believe them, we don't know how to hold our faith with Jesus because it feels emotionally disingenuous to be wrestling with this doubt in this story while trying to proclaim in public that we're followers of Jesus. And so rather than being a fraud, we pull back and pull back and pull back and walk away, not realizing that it was the enemy at every single step, distorting your wounds, lying to you through your pain, manipulating the things done against you to convince you of one thing. What? Jesus isn't trustworthy. He's trustworthy. I gotta stop. We gotta go. We're gonna close this teaching series next week on 2 Sundays from now on August 11th. We're gonna have a gathering in the evening where for anyone who just wants prayer, we're gonna take time, we're gonna worship, we're gonna lay hands and pray on anyone who wants, just whether it's about receiving the Spirit, just walking in the baptism of the Spirit, whether it's about just wrestling through places where you feel like you're caught or stuck or need freedom. We're just gonna take an entire evening and just as a church pray through that. And so I just want you to know that freedom is the future of our church. And I really love you and honor you. And I can't wait next week to tell you about the liberty of what God has done in me, about the lies I could have never even seen that I believed, and the salvation of Jesus and how real it is. So come on, stand, prayer teams come forward. I gotta pray and let you go. Jesus, I love my church. Bless them today, cover them and protect them. Lord, would you just pour out your Spirit and your love and your faithfulness? Lord, we thank you that you see us, you're for us. You will not abandon us. You will not orphan us. You are the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. You are the God who finishes what he starts, and we can trust you. And I love you, and we honor you. Bless my church in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Listen, may God bless you, keep you, guide you, and may you know everywhere you go this week, you are radically loved by Jesus. If we can pray, let's pray. If not, we'll see you next week.